Trust and changes to business management. Let's talk about trust first. Trust decrease competition. Trust basically create a business environment where there's little to no competition. And as a result, a few big, powerful companies are getting very rich. Business is growing and they are forming trusts. Standard Oil forms the first trust in 1882, but from 1898 to 1903, there are lots of new trusts formed. So many that by 1904, 40% of our nation's manufacturing is part of a trust. That's a big number. And what we get is what's called an oligopoly. It's close to a monopoly. What it means is that a few big companies dominate. And that's what we see in the railroad industry. That's what we see in steel. That's what we see in oil. So much so that by 1901, 1% of the nation's companies, a small fraction of the total number of companies in America, but 1% of the companies is producing 50% of our nation's manufactured goods. A small number of companies are dominating industry. And it's not just in America. This is extending beyond our borders. For example, the United Fruit Corporation gains plantations in former Spanish colonies after the Spanish-American War. We'll talk about that later. Also, U.S. Steel is fixing prices with foreign companies. So this lack of competition is extending even beyond international boundaries. When investment banks like J.P. Morgan's get involved and they finance the mergers of companies and they finance the reorganization of companies, they're going to set them up so that they do not compete. One of their tricks is they use what were called interlocking directorates, where the same people or the same group of people might be on the board of directors for multiple companies that are supposed to be competing with each other, but they're going to steer their companies in a direction so that they don't compete, and all of those companies can get rich. This number of trusts creates a debate in America. On the bad side, trusts lead to high prices and they lead to a loss of individual power in the economy. Other people say this is just a mark of the times. It's not only in America that we see business trusts forming, and they're producing more goods. And it leads to a really complex debate. On one side, progressives, who we'll talk more about, really like efficiency, and trusts are efficient. So some progressives, like Teddy Roosevelt, are okay with certain trusts. But some business leaders want some reform as well. Let's talk about how business management changed as well at this time. There is a new focus put on speed and product being turned out, not on the workers. And they are no longer trying to create unique products. Now all the products should be uniform. We see some innovations being really important, like the assembly line, and also research laboratories. General Electric, GE, is the first to use an industrial research laboratory. And it's there that they improve on their light bulbs, and they also lay the groundwork for the cathode ray tube, which is the key component in televisions. Businesses are also going from small scale to large scale. By 1920, almost 50% of workers work in plants with over 250 workers. That's a big factory. And 30% worked for a company with multiple plants. So they work for a company that might have a factory in Pittsburgh, a factory in Cleveland, a factory in Chicago as well. Work is also becoming a lot more mechanized. Material plants, like making glass, has become basically automated, and they can run constantly with multiple shifts of people coming in. Machines like Irving Colburn's plate glass machine makes this possible. He created the machine that makes plate glass, and it was bought by Ford to use on Ford cars. Business is also going from being worker controlled to management controlled. It's becoming a lot more managed. The rules for workers are going to come down from a central office. and they are going to do everything they can to manage production flow. The workers lose control of the workplace. And when they want to increase production, most factories just sped up the machines. For example, the auto industry produced 4 times as many cars in 1919 as they did in 1909, mainly because they just cranked up the assembly line. And it's also going to become a lot more scientifically based. It went from the workers setting the pace to now what we call scientific labor management. And this is largely the result of the work of that man, Frederick Winslow Taylor, and his ideas, sometimes called Taylorism. Basically, what he wanted to do was maximize the efficiency from each worker. And he said a few things. One, that management should be responsible for job knowledge, like the rules of the workplace, and the how to do things needs to come from management, not be conveyed by other workers. Also, management should control the workplace through enforced standardization and enforced adoption of best implements and working conditions, and basically enforce cooperation from the workers. So if you're supposed to use a number 9 hammer for this part of the process, but you like a number 7 hammer, tough luck. You need to use a number 9 hammer because that's what's been determined to be best for the job. Taylorism is very influential through a lot of industries. Obviously, the workers are going to produce more at this time, and depending on which historians you look at, they may have even earned more as well. However, all of these changes have a very dehumanizing effect on labor. People now feel like they're just part of a machine, no longer a craftsman. And as a result, people are going to lose pride in their workmanship as well. It really leads, Taylorism and scientific labor management really leads to some unsettling experiments with new tools and methods of efficiency. Just treating people like they are cogs in a machine and they're running tests to see what is more efficient. And work just becomes even more monotonous and boring. And as a result, it's dangerous. We've got faster machines running now and bored workers. It's no surprise there are a high number of injuries and even death on the worksite. The worst disaster happens in 1911 in the Triangle Shirtwaist Fire, where 146 people, mostly immigrants, mostly women, died in a shirtwaist factory. They died as a result of the doors being locked to prevent theft and to keep labor organizers out. And there's no good fire escapes on their building. So when a fire started in the shirtwaist factory, there was nowhere for those people to go. This leads to a huge funeral march in New York City. Speeches are given, some by Rose Schneiderman, who was one of the leaders of the Women's Trade Union League. And they say that not enough has been done. And the governor appoints a state factory investigation commission. And what they do is they recommend that there are laws passed to shorten the work week in New York City and to improve safety in the workplace. So this is a start, at least in New York City.